My name's Belle and welcome to Daslius, Learning the Language of Autism. This is chapter 1 of our new series called Routines. Routines in Autism, and everything that I can think of that might be useful to be aware of around routine. Everything that I talk about comes from our own experiences at home and what I've learned from George, our son, and also what I've been told and what I've learned from some other autistic people of all different age ranges, from sort of young through teenage to adulthood. Obviously, some of these are examples of what works for us and for George, and I'm not saying that these things I talk about are for every single autistic person. I can only, go on our own experiences. But what I hope is that this will give you an insight into some of the reasons why routines are so important to autistic people, generally speaking, and that it's not just, it's just a routine. There are so many other valid, important reasons why autistic people put routines in place. Routines, rituals, ceremony, behaviours, whatever you want to call it. I've learned over the years just how important they are, but more importantly, why. And it's amazingly interesting and fascinating as to why some routines are really, really important and what they bring. And that's what I want to talk about. So I've got some notes down here, so I'm going to keep looking that way, and that's what I'm looking at. So this first chapter is really giving you two examples of why routines can be important. So, the first reason that I thought I would talk about is that a routine can actually help understand and process language, communication, and social cues, facial expressions, all of that social stuff that we do to communicate with each other, generally as humans on the planet. And sometimes when you are autistic, sometimes a lot of what a neurotypical person would give when they're speaking and communicating can be missed because there's just so much going on. But it isn't always clear to an autistic person as to what a neurotypical person is actually saying, especially if that neurotypical person isn't speaking in language that gives enough clarity, which we'll talk about in another chapter in more detail. But what I want to talk about is why it helps with communication is how can I explain this? So if you've got, say, it's just giving an example of getting dressed in the morning. Sometimes a routine of getting dressed, like a really strict routine, like the order of the clothes that get put on, what clothes are worn on a particular day, what clothes go with what clothes, where they get dressed, and what they do within that routine can help them. Kind of like if you imagine like a computer system and it's got different files in it, that sometimes I've learned with our son that each set of routines, each part of the day, each activity that happens has got a really beautiful routine within it, within a routine. And what I've learned is that we use, lots of different language for different things that we do, but we also use like a common flow of language, like the same words we use through all sorts of things that we do. But with my son, I've noticed and I've learned that even though he may have heard certain words many, many times, if he hears them in different contexts and different situations and different activities, it's like he's hearing the word for the very first time, because the word is used in a different setting, with different equipment and different situations. I hope that's clear what I'm trying to say. So by my son, and what other people have told me, by creating routines that are very, necessary to be just so, it helps that autistic person to learn that that folder of communication. So it kind of like keeps it compact, so it's easier for them to put it somewhere in their brain, a filing system in their brain where they can compartmentalize that. So then they can kind of like access that information. They can access the cues that you give, the body language that you use, the way your mouth moves, the way your mouth sounds, the way the words sound when they come out of your mouth. All these things are processed intricately, and probably in a lot more detail than any neurotypical person could ever imagine. Neurotypical person will hear a word. A lot of autistic people hear more than the word. So they hear the sound of it, the smell of it, the vibration of it, all sorts of stuff. So I found that within a routine, it helps to put that into a section. So then it's easier for that autistic person to learn that language in those words, rather than learning a whole new language that's just all open-ended. It's like, oh, I'm learning this chapter. It's like little chapters. Oh, washing up, being in the kitchen, eating my dinner is one chapter, and they learn that language. So that's what a routine can help with. It's really amazingly clever. I think it's fantastic. So that's what I've learned, because there's so much sensory stimuli going on around that sometimes it's difficult to process exactly what is going on, and because there's just so much noise and smells and movement and energy and all sorts of stuff going on. So when something is homed down into manageable sections, such as a routine, it makes everything else a little bit more easier too. So I think that's a really, really cool skill, actually. The other reason that routines have become really important for my son is that they can be motivational. So what I mean by that is, I don't mean by using bribes. We don't do that in our house. I don't say, if you do this, you can have that, or if you don't, flap or stim, then you can have this toy or this whatever. It wouldn't work for George anyway. He's not motivationally led that way. But even if he was, we've just never done it. I don't believe in doing that with people. So I don't mean that. What I mean is that, I'll give you an example in our house. So George always had real challenges around food and eating different types of food and any kind of food, really. Not anymore. But what he's done to get him to this stage, and he's 15 now, to eat a real healthy, a different array of food, has meant that he has created his own routine for him to be able to do that. So as a parent, I can go, well, I want him to eat, because he wasn't hardly eating anything. So I want him to eat. So I want him to eat is more important to me as his mother than it is whether he sits up at the table, uses a knife and fork and sits around with everybody else and eats. It's more important to me that he eats in a comfortable, relaxed and happy state for all sorts of reasons. So I've not allowed, that's not the right word. So my part is to get him to eat different foods. That's what I'm bringing to the table. It's up to him then, I feel, to then create his own routine around eating so that he can eat and he can eat it happily and look forward to the next meal and really begin to relax and therefore enjoy food, and then then be able to kind of recognize when he's full up and recognize when he's hungry. When you're anxious and stressed all the time, you can't pick up all those other cues. So for the example of motivational, because I want him to eat and he's enjoying it, I believe he's enjoying it more because he has been left to eat it in the way in which he's comfortable. So George will stand up at the side of the kitchen side. He will get his own food out of the fridge, one piece of food at a time, and then he'll put it on the plate. He'll sort of bounce it on the plate once or twice, and then he'll put it on, and he'll go and get another piece of food, put that on the plate until he's got everything that he needs. And then he'll take it off the plate bit by bit, line it all up on the side. He eats a lot of raw veg and a lot of raw food and stuff. And then he'll eat one Brussels sprout, peel it, eat it. Then he'll eat one piece, like one carrot, and so on. So it takes a long time for him to eat his tea, and that's within his routine. But he eats. Sometimes he needs to move around while he's chewing certain foods, and he makes lots of like lovely noises, and he does loads of hand movements and gestures, and then sometimes he has to go into the lounge to get water. He doesn't want water with him on the side. It has to be in another room, so he'll go and have a drink, then he'll come back. Rather than me go, no, you've got to sit at the table, and no, you've got to sit here and with your cup here, and you've got to use your knife and fork. He always uses his fingers. All of his food is finger food. He doesn't do wet food. So that is what I mean by motivational, because he's created a routine of his own where he is happy and comfortable, where he can stand, he can move, he can express himself, he can filter all the sensory feelings and emotions and experiences that he's having while he's eating. That's the motivation for him to eat. So that is what I mean by motivation. And to me, that is really important. So you imagine if you stopped an autistic person that needed to do that. If I stopped him from doing that, it'd stop eating. It'd just stop eating. And my view on that as his parent is it's a no-brainer. So if he wants to create his own routine to motivate him to eat happily and joyfully, and kind of like, he tells me when it's ready, when he wants to eat, which tells me that he's ready. He'll only eat what he needs. He doesn't eat any more than he needs. So I see that as a motivational routine to get him eating and being comfortable with it. So that's what I have found about routines. Two things. There's more. There's much, much more. I've talked a lot about sensory stuff in this video as well, so I just wanted to remind people that I have done other videos to do with sensory stuff, especially around food. There's a whole series on food and autism and sensory processing. So if you haven't seen that and you're interested in that, then please do look that up. And at the end of this video, I'll put a little link up to that series for you to see. So that's all I'm going to say this week on routines, because that's a lot for you to get your, process and get your head around. Just please be patient. Like, it's really important to be patient with your child and allow them time and space to grow and discover and develop a routine that they are really happy and comfortable with. Because if you are constantly stressed, you're constantly challenged to the point where all of your choices are taken away just because for the sake of social rules, or you're worried about what other people might think, or whatever those reasons are. I've given you an example of why we eat the way that we eat and why it works for us, and how important it is. But if I was to say, insist that George sat down on a chair, if I was to insist that he was to have his drink with him on the table, if I was to insist that he used a knife and fork to cut everything up, it would just be so distressing for him, and he would be hungry and not able to enjoy eating in a relaxed state, which can cause all sorts of, physical, emotional, and mental problems if you are not eating. If you're eating in a fight or flight state, or you're scared, then it's not going to do you any good. And everybody has the right to be able to sit and relax and eat and enjoy their food. And I eat with him. I eat my tea in the kitchen with him, but I sit at the table. I eat food my way. I eat the food I like. I cook it. Sometimes he helps me. He watches. We talk about it. He eats where he eats. I eat where I eat. We're both being honoured. We're both being respected, and we both get to do what we need. So that's why I think it's important to allow autistic children to create routines. Because if you don't and they're stressed, that's when you start going into shutdowns, meltdowns, and just an inability to be able to trust that it's okay to try new things. So I think it's really clever. I think it's really amazing that routines are designed, and why. And as your child grows and develops through life experiences, and they get more confident, and they learn more about who they are and what they like, and they learn more coping strategies because they've had time to figure them out, then sometimes routines do change. They change naturally and they evolve naturally. We don't have to hurry these things along. It's okay. So next week I'm going to talk about why stims and other tics and quirks are important, and I'm going to give a couple of other examples of what routines can help your child with, like I have this week. Okay, thank you for watching, and please do comment in the boxes, subscribe if you want more, if you want an alert and you want to know when these videos are coming out. They're normally coming out once a week on average. Then please do subscribe, and I hope to see you again next week. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.